Now, welcome back to the last of my re-recordings of videos. I decided to leave up the Lexington and Concord video. For one, I wanted you guys to see what the original videos looked like. Two, I liked that it was posted on July 4th, because it's, July 4th episode. I also thought that it was fine enough to just leave up. I liked the information that was in there, I didn't want to re-record it. But this episode is a re-record, take 2 of the fortresses of Belgium. Now, at the start of World War I, Germany knows that a breakthrough in Belgium can produce very fast results at the start of the war, because Belgium is kind of not doing too hot at the start of the war. So they can go through Belgium, and then from Belgium through the unprotected French border on the border of Belgium, and then come down on Paris. Now, with this beautifully drawn from memory map of what Europe looks like, I can show you what this looks like. So you have the Netherlands right here. The Netherlands stays neutral during World War I. They don't fight. Now Germany is here off the little drawing that I made. What they're going to do is they're going to come through this part of Belgium and around. And the hope is that they can swing around and then down onto Paris like this, okay? Beautiful drawing. Beautiful, I know. But the hope is that with this hook maneuver, they can catch the French off guard and they can open up a wide enough front that the French can't cover all of the different avenues of attack, which is the hope. Now, very quickly, once they start this invasion, they realize that we kind of screwed up, because this tiny little nation that isn't supposed to be doing this well is holding us off for an extra 2 months behind schedule. And it's like 80,000 defenders that are really putting up most of the fights. So this premier fighting force, best in the world, is getting bested by 80,000 Belgians with rifles that their dads used. And it's a very defiant battle against the Germans, and it works really well in the Belgians' favor. And I would go as far to say that had it not been for the Belgians fighting and holding out in these 3 cities, that we could have seen a very drastically different World War I. If they had not been able to hold out for as long as they did, we realistically could have seen the fall of Paris. I'm willing to say that. I am not willing to say that the fall of Paris would have caused France to give up and surrender. France, at the beginning of World War I, very quickly realized what was happening and had already been making plans to move the government to the city of Bordeaux, which is on the western side of France. Now, it would have been an incredibly demoralizing blow. Maybe we see some weird alternate history where the fighting kind of stagnates a little bit more, or Germany, causes France to surrender. They take some land from France. Who knows what happens? But this battle stopped all of that from happening and really kind of cemented the slow bog that, World War I would become. Now, this image on the screen here shows the city of Liege, the one that borders Germany, and it shows the position of the 12 forts protecting the city. Each one of these is a concrete monolith that, when made in 1890, was the best in the world. The cities of Liege, Namur, and Antwerp were the best anywhere because they had to be protected from France, Germany, and then their capital. You have Liege protecting against Germany because it's right on the border. You have Namur, which is protecting against France. It's right on their border. And then Antwerp, their capital, which is further back in the nation, is also protected as a last stand. And each of these gets these super modernized forts with 21 centimeter guns. In 1890, that is fantastic. That is an 8-inch gun. There should be nothing that can penetrate the walls because the walls can withstand 8-inch guns as well. It can throw the heaviest and it can take the heaviest. With 13-foot thick concrete roofs and 4-foot thick walls, it really should be able to hold up just forever. And it kind of doesn't. In the span of 20 years, you have the Germans actively preparing for war against Belgium. They know what the forts are made out of, how to defeat them, what they're going to need to defeat them. So they take steps to do that, and we'll get to that in a minute. But of these 12 forts, it is important to note that 10 of them are obviously taken during the war. but 10 of them are able to be modernized and used again in World War II, which speaks to the fact of how effective these were, because they saw how effective they were in World War I, and they were like, let's run that back. Let's do it again, second time around. And it's not as effective the second time around, but it doesn't matter. They tried. The other two forts that were not modernized for World War II is Fort Lonson, which is a very large fort and literally gets the top blown off of it, and it was just decided to just scrap it. It's not worth trying to repair it. And the other one is Lanton, which is small. It's just not reused for damage, positioning, monetary, handful of reasons. It's just not reused. Now, this image here shows a cutaway of one of those forts in Liège. Now, each of these forts has its own power and its own water, because they want these to be able to hold out should something happen. Now, once you get into these forts, they're not hospitable. You don't want to be there. Just because they have power and water does not mean that this is a 5-star hotel, but it does mean that the defenders could supposedly hold out for a good while until World War I rolls around and they're not prepped for what's to come. Now, one of the things that kind of is good and bad about these forts is that all of the forts were made with a weak side on the rear of the fort facing inward to the city, because they were thinking, if we need to recapture this fort, let's purposely make this side weaker, that way we can take it back later. Now, this also means that if the enemy gets behind one fort and they can get into the city, they can come up behind the other 11 forts and get to them on the easier side, which it's kind of just one of those things you have to take the gamble on. Like, if they can get one fort, then they can probably get the other forts anyway, so the weaker side doesn't really matter that much. If they can take 2 forts, then it really doesn't matter. You know, it's just one of those things that the trade-off is worth it. Now, one of the things that really does kind of hurt the forts a lot is the fact that the sanitation and the barracks and the food and everything else like that was located outside of the main fortress area, which means that under heavy shelling, the troops can't get out there. In this image, you can see the 13-foot thick concrete roof leading to the ammunition storages just below the gun, and the gun's on a rotating gimbal so it can shoot super far away, and there's a ditch, and there's dugouts, and it's top of the line. There's parapets with trenches, except you can't use the parapets under heavy shelling, so if the enemy advances on a creeping barrage, you can't do anything. If that one gun gets taken out, you can't do anything. You see how I'm going with this? Like, there's ways to conquer these forts kind of easily. Now, the Germans show up on August 4th of 1914, expecting a 2-day battle for the city. They really think they can take it in 2 days. And they go up to the first fort, and they try to attack it, and get thrown back with impossibly bad casualties. So then they have to wait for their extremely special artillery to arrive, because there's only a handful of guns out there, even in 1914, that can take out a fortress of this magnitude. And it takes an extra 8 days for the first gun to arrive. That is 8 days that they don't have to waste. This is 6 days past schedule, and they're not even through the first city. So the first gun rolls up, and 3 days later, the entire city has fallen. They spend 8 days waiting for the gun, not being able to do something about these forts, and within 3 days, all the forts and the city is gone. And that is because the guns that they managed to bring up to attack the Belgians with was just that stupidly large. It is inconceivably large. Now, this gun on the screen here is several inches larger than what those forts were made to defend from. That fort is made to defend from 8 inches of a shell. The Germans roll out a 12-inch cannon, which can penetrate the forts. They are fast to move, not really fast, faster, and they can do some damage. This image on the screen here is a 16.5-inch Krups gun, or 420 millimeter gun. This gun is so comically large that not only does it take multiple people to crew each one of these, they can only fire around 8 shells an hour. And they wouldn't be firing 8 shells an hour either, because these were so few that they didn't have the parts necessary to replace them if one goes out. So they're not even firing 8 shells an hour, which speaks to the fact that if you can't fire 8 shells an hour, but you can take out 12 forts in 3 days, just how powerful these things are. And they have to be moved in individual pieces. This sucker would go down into multiple parts and have to be brought up via train, assembled on train tracks. It is a hassle to get these things moving anywhere. Those 8 days it took this to get moved up was not a very long distance either. It is just wild the effort it takes to just move one of these guns, and they brought up a handful of them. Just to put it into perspective of how big this gun is, if you haven't had enough already, this gun is 16.5 inches. The second biggest gun in the world at the time was a 13-inch cannon placed on a British battleship a handful of years earlier, and that was considered top of the line. The Germans made a cannon that was 3 inches wider than a cannon put on a boat, and they managed to use that in the field. It is inconceivably large, and I know what that word means. Also, to put it in perspective, the Iowa-class battleships produced in World War II, a full 30-ish years later, had 16-inch cannons. So this gun is bigger than that. Huge, huge cannons. Now, this image on the screen here is Fort Lonson. This is the one that literally gets its top blown off during the battle. This was taken a few years ago. So this was the final fort to hold out. This fort has survived 11 days of continuous shelling by 12-inch guns, and they are still going. But by the time of the 11th day, they have no electricity. They are extremely low on ventilation. People are passing out inside of the fort due to the lack of ventilation. And at 4 p.m. that day, one of those massive 16.5-inch Krupp guns rolls into position and fires. And an hour and a half after that first shell lands, a shell penetrates those 13-foot thick roofs, goes down, hits the ammunition storage, which was not protected as it should be, and blows the top off. It literally causes the walls of the fort in some places to be blown outwards, and the fort collapses in on itself. The turret falls down. It is huge. The explosion is just impossibly large. And once Fort Lonson goes down, the Battle of Liege is over. That's it. One of the craziest things about this battle, though, is that the guy that was in charge of Fort Lonson is captured alive, pulled from the rubble of Fort Lonson unconscious, and when he wakes up is quoted as saying in a handwritten letter to his king, King Albert, "I would have gladly given my life, but death would not have me." The guy's just too tough. He's too tough. But either way, these Belgians managed to make a 2-day fight that the Germans were prepared for into an 11-day, multi-thousand casualty battle. They slowed them down so much that the French are really starting to mobilize and get people moving. It is a direct result of Liege that you have Namur, Antwerp, and then the Marne, which is the miracle save pulled off by France. And we'll get to that in a minute too. Now, this is the city of Namur. This one is protecting against the French. And this one has 9 forts surrounding it. So the Germans end up taking Liege, and on August 20th, they show up ready to take Namur. Except this time, the Belgians have reinforced the forts. They have put extra defensive measures. They have set up barbed wire and trenches connecting the forts. That way, when the Germans attack, they'll be ready for the infantry. Except the Germans are also ready. On August 23rd, the Germans this time brought those massive, 16.5-inch guns up to the front with them. And one by one, starting on August 23rd, they take out every single fort, one by one by one. In August 25th, the city has fallen. That is the end of Namur. The fight of Namur is not as drawn out as Liege is, but it does slow down the Germans again. It slows them down enough that the French have time to recuperate. They realize that, okay, well, Namur just fell, and we really don't have the equipment or the manpower to defend against this German army that just took Namur, one of the most defended cities in the world. So we're going to pull back. So the French abandon their positions in order to reinforce even more defended positions. And it's a result of that they slow them down even more, leading to other battles in France managing to, stay alive just that much longer. Now, Antwerp is the capital of Belgium, and they are absolutely final stand ready to defend this at all costs. There is 21 forts surrounding the city, and they have a secondary inner ring of older forts as well that they're going to defend in. And they're going to defend in the streets. And in preparation, they have made trenches in defensive positions. And they have flooded the fields. That way they can slow down the German advance. They are not going to lose this battle any time soon. And the Germans should be knocking on their door any day now. And they kind of are, except not exactly in the way that you think. So Antwerp is kind of on the Dutch border, like away from the French, and the Germans have already been slowed down enough. They know that they need to do something, so they push into France. They've already made their turn to the west to get over there. So Belgium sees this, and they see that they are, turning away from Antwerp, so they start sending out these fairly large sorties, a couple thousand troops, to disrupt German supply lines, communication lines, pick off stragglers, whatever they can. And they get off 2 sorties. The third sortie doesn't end too well at all. And you also have Winston Churchill, the same guy that, you can't reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth guy. That guy is directly trying to help out Antwerp. Like, he really wants Belgium to survive. He really thinks that it is crucial to keep Belgium alive to win the war. So Belgium has about 60,000 troops inside the city. There's a fair chunk of these that survived the Battle of Liège or Namur, ones that, streamed in from Antwerp. And you have Churchill, who is, putting in a Royal Naval Division, and he's trying to get a Marine Division in there, and he's really trying to help them out. Except the Germans get to Antwerp before the British soldiers can. On September 28th, so about almost 2 months after the outbreak of the war, the Germans fire on Antwerp, and they brought up the legitimately heavy, massive guns. That night on the 28th, every single night following that until the fall of the city, there were trains that were run out of the city into the more northern parts of Belgium to evacuate women, children, wounded, younger soldiers that don't have any experience, and get them into a part of Belgium where they can fight for another day. By October 7th, the outer ring of forts has been taken by the Germans, by just the comically large guns, huge guns. And the remaining British and Belgian soldiers are sitting inside the city, ready to make a big, final stand. Except by the middle of October 7th, the heavy, 420 millimeter, 16.5-inch guns have been rolled in range of the city. And by the afternoon of the 8th, so the day afterwards, the British and the Belgians make a coordinated withdrawal out of the city, with the British covering the Belgians. And on the 9th, so a day after the 8th, that's how numbers work, the British troops have evacuated out. Most of the troops are completely gone. And by the 10th of October, the Germans have gotten into Antwerp. They are finding empty forts and empty streets left and right. And the fight for Antwerp is over. Now, this is not the end of Belgium. Belgium does continue to fight. They have this fighting retreat all through the north of Belgium, where they have small skirmishes with the Germans throughout. It's really more like a fast retreat. The British have some pretty heroic stands in the southern part of Belgium. And then the 5% of Belgium that was not taken by the Germans, which was Ypres and that salient, does hold out for the rest of the war. And Belgium obviously makes a comeback in 1918. Belgium is still here today. Now, one of the coolest things about Belgium is that not only did they hold off the Germans and slow them down in some places by upwards of 2 going on 3 months, but also the fact that their leader fought with them side by side. King Albert II fought in the frontline trenches with his troops at times when it got, the toughest. And his wife, the Queen of Belgium, was a nurse throughout the entirety of the war, treating soldiers in backline trenches. And you can see on this map here, just how little of Belgium remained. It's in the very top portion of it, 5%. And some of the most hellish fighting of World War I would happen in Belgium at the Ypres salient, the second and third battles of Ypres especially. And again, it is as a direct result of the Belgians that you have Germany slowing down enough that we still have France in a leg to fight on. And who knows how much longer the war could have gone on should the Belgians have not been able to make that stand. So Belgium's pretty cool. They do their job really well. They do their job and then more. So if you enjoyed this video, you should check out the What's in This Photo video that's also about Belgium. It's also pretty cool. The Belgians are really cool. And I hope to see you guys in the next one.